Feels a little bit like deja vu for me, but we've got some new faces around the table. First, I would like to officially call this meeting to order. Yay. We have some new members of board visitors that I would like to recognize this morning. Dickie Bell. Thank you. Terry Edwards. Thank you. Suzanne Obenschein. Michael Stoltzfus. And Jack White. Very, very pleased to have you with us and look forward to working with all of you in the future. We also have a new speaker of the Faculty Senate, so I'd like to recognize Kathy Ott-Walter. And I'm very, very pleased that Xavier Williams is serving a second year as our student representative to the board. We also have Shadi Bakhtiari, Shadi, do you want to stand? Who is our SGA representative, president. Thank you for coming today. And I would also like to welcome members of Dr. Hamilton's class. If you would please stand. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. I would also like to note for the board members, there is a packet, it looks like this, at your table, at each of your seats. We did revise the new board member orientation. This packet summarizes everything around campus. So thought it would be valuable for each of the board members to have a copy of it. We are always looking to improve. So as I noted to the new members yesterday, give you a meeting or two to kind of get your feet on the ground, but would love some feedback on the orientation to make sure that it is as comprehensive and as meaningful as possible. Okay, great. All right, with that, I'm going to move to the first item on the agenda, which is the consent order. There are 4 items in the consent order, which include the April 22 minutes, the Executive Committee June 22 minutes, the Executive Committee August 29th minutes, and the bank resolution. Does anyone want to remove an item from this consent order? Okay. Then I would like a motion to approve the consent order.
Madam Director, so moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Perfect. Thank you. Next on the agenda is the committee reports. We're going to do them alphabetically. So academic excellence, Matthew Greg Keeling, if you would go first, please.
The Academic Excellence Committee heard the following reports at our meeting yesterday afternoon. We first heard a divisional update for academic affairs from the provost, Heather Coltman. She outlined the touchstones that will guide the division's priorities this year, the academic affairs strategic plan, the climate study report, and responding to 15 recommendations from the task force on racial equity. The provost updated the committee on several projects and their progress over the summer. They included a revision to instructional faculty hiring guidelines, driven by the work of a joint administration faculty task force. We had the Faculty Senate Speaker report from Kathy Ott-Walter, our new Faculty Senate Speaker. She shared that the Senate is excited to move forward with working with the administration on shared governance, creating processes for more transparency and decision-making, and defining workload in a way that supports and creates a healthy work environment. She highlighted research, project planning, and service learning work of faculty in the anthropology and health sciences departments. We had a report from the College of Education with Dean Mark Lesperance, who shared an update on the Grow Your Own pilot program and the Lab School for Innovation and Career Exploration initiative. The recent state budget allocated $4.2 million to implement the Grow Your Own Teaching Fellows pilot program. Additionally, the federal government has allocated $620,000 to assist currently employed teacher assistants to achieve their licensure. Very quickly, the Grow Your Own is a sort of a pipeline program whereby students who are committed to becoming teachers, sometimes traditional students, other times teachers' aides that are currently in school systems, are given tuition scholarship in exchange for their achieving their licensure. That's right, Dean, correct. In 2 years, is that what you said? And then finally, as a result of the recent this year's General Assembly session, $100 million has been dedicated to the lab school initiatives in Virginia, something that we've been talking about here for many years now. And JMU is going to begin work with Rockingham County Schools to develop lab schools in all 4 area high schools. We had a faculty hiring update from Elizabeth Old-Mixon, who is our Vice Provost for Faculty Affairs and Curriculum. She presented that in this past year, Academic Affairs has hired over 110 new outstanding instructional and administrative and professional faculty. Rudy Molina, the Vice Provost, outlined programs and services of the Student Academic Success and Enrollment Management, and gave a presentation highlighting the impact of learning centers, the Advising Hub, Transfer Virginia, the Bridge to Madison program, and the Quality Enhancement Plan, all of these being the various programs that we have here to help students to succeed and to complete their journey here at JMU. And they highlighted a number of different scenarios of traditional 4-year student who starts as a freshman, transfer students. And was sort of clear to us on the committee that the existence of all of these programs to help students along the way, particularly at such a large university, is really key to their success here at JMU. And finally, because we're in our committee this year sort of spotlighting the work of different colleges, we heard first from the College of Arts and Letters and Dean Robert Aguirre, and Associate Dean Melinda Adams, who was also one of my political science professors 20 years ago. And they highlighted the breadth of the faculty research going on in the College of Arts and Letters. They recognized several arts and letters faculty members who have received awards and grant funding, huge grant funds. And then they highlighted research successes in the college that create opportunities for students to apply classroom learning and build skills that prepare them for professional life after their graduation. We heard from Grace Gordon, who's a graduate of the class of 2022. She came back to share the impact of her experience engaging in research with faculty members, the impact that had on her throughout her undergraduate years. And the meeting adjourned at 2:34 p.m. Madam Rector, I move the report of the Academic Excellence Committee be accepted.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Thank you. Next up is advancement engagement. Mr. Wellborn.
Thank you very much. The Advancement and Engagement Committee, we made ourselves very hungry to start off our meeting because we talked about our favorite foods. So whether it was falafels, whether it was macaroni and cheese, and even crab cakes, but mine was cheese sticks. So we jumped into our reports afterwards, where we received the fundraising report. The athletics report had a record-breaking year for 2022 with 4,695 donors and the annual fund record of $4 million. And for 2023 athletics, the donors are up 1,202, up 200 donors from the same year last year, and a $353,000 raise, up 10,000 from the same time last year. We received the University Advancement Report, where there was $34.7 million given for a year of 2022, 3 times the 3-year rolling average of the period of the campaign. Next, we received a Vice President update introductions where Caitlin Reed, as a new part of the advancement team, provided updates on the state and government relations to the committee. We introduced Dr. Amit Shala, a global ambassador with a focus on international alumni engagement and student recruitment. Andy Breen then provided an overview of several different college rankings and then its relevance for the team. Next, we received an enrollment update for the fall of 2022. The recruitment of the class of 2026 was successful. and they're meeting their goals for both state and local undergraduate recruitment. Afterwards, we received a report from the Women of Madison for the 10-year anniversary, where they discussed milestones and accomplishments for the future endeavors for the Women of Madison, celebrating the group's 10-year anniversary. Afterwards, we went to a closed session where the committee, where there were no actions that were taken. The meeting adjourned late at 4:28. So Madam Rector, I move the report from the Advancement Committee be accepted.
Thank you, Mr. Waldron. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you very much. Next up is athletics, Mr. Lynch.
Great, thank you. We had a very good meeting yesterday. The Athletics Committee heard the following reports at the meeting on Thursday, September 15th. We started with an athletics update. For the current academic year, JMU teams have compiled a 17, 11, and 2 cumulative record for a 600% winning percentage. Football sits at 2-0 to start its transitional FBS season. Men's soccer is 2-3, but it's early in the season. Women's soccer is 4-2-2. Volleyball is 6-3. Field hockey is 3-3. JMU inducted its Hall of Fame class of 2022 on September 9th with a group featuring swimmer and coach Samantha Smith-Barani, former women's basketball head coach Kenny Brooks, and one of his star athletes, Dawn Evans. Football quarterback Rodney Landers, longtime women's soccer head coach Dave Lombardo, baseball catcher Jake Lowry, track runner Anthony Wallace, and golfer Jay Woodson. I actually was here the night that they did it, and it was extremely exciting. It was a good vibe on campus. As part of recognizing 50 years of Title IX, JMU will hold a year-long initiative to highlight the key moments made possible by Title IX. JMU also launched the Dukes Do Better sportsmanship campaign prior to the start of fall sports as a way to focus on appropriate fan and competitor conduct at sporting events. Then we turned after that to the 2021-2022 Strategic Plan Accountability Measures Report. JMU Athletics continues to meet and exceed the majority of the measures outlined in the university strategic plan. Then we turn to the compliance update. The recent Supreme Court ruling in NCAA versus Alston ruled that the NCAA restricting non-cash education-related benefits violates antitrust laws and change legislation relating to educational-related benefits and other tangible items not included in cost of attendance. Things you probably have heard of, we talked about next. Name, image, and likeness, which is called NIL, if you read about that in the paper, which permits student athletes to profit off their name, image, and likeness, continues to evolve and is regulated by NCAA rules, Virginia law, and JMU's policy. The newly developed NCAA Transformation Committee is currently reviewing multiple issues relating to transfers, the infractions process, and enhancing student athletes' benefits. I think we all agreed and heard from Mr. Bourne during the meeting. There'll be much to follow in the upcoming months and years on that. We next move to the fundraising update. JMU surpassed $4 million in annual fund donations for the first time in fiscal year 2022, passing the previous high of $2.9 million in fiscal year 2021. This includes a record 4,695 donors and total fundraising efforts that surpassed $5 million. This fiscal year's total donor count and annual fund are both trending ahead of this time last year. We concluded the meeting with Mr. Bourne giving an update on the Sun Belt Conference, which is very exciting for JMU. He was impressed with the Sun Belt transition. The conference has been both strategic and collaborative. JMU will continue to lobby for full alignment of all JMU sports programs in the conference. The meeting adjourned at 4:04 p.m. Madam Rector, I move that this report and the actions taken by the Athletics Committee be accepted. Thank you.
Mr. Lynch. Is there a second?
Second.
Any comments or questions? All those in favor? Any opposed? All right, thank you very much. Next is audit, Vice Rector, Mr. Falcon.
Thank you, Madam Rector. The audit committee heard the following reports at the meeting on September 15th, 2022. Mark Angel reviewed the JLARC report regarding JMU compliance with its level 3 management agreement. JLARC reviewed extensive performance data and other information submitted by JMU and compared it against standards and requirements in the Code of Virginia, the Appropriations Act, and the management agreement. JLARC concluded that JMU is operating its business functions consistent with the terms of the management agreement and is meeting nearly all relevant business function performance standards. JMU has experienced modest operational efficiencies with autonomy gained through level 3 status. And SHEB certified that JMU meets the relevant academic standards, also known as institutional performance standards in the Appropriations Act. The annual report for audit and management services was reviewed by Becky Holmes, and the audit team is once again fully staffed, which we were all very happy to hear. The committee approved the internal audit budget for 2022-23 and the revised 2022-2023 internal audit plan. The committee then went to closed session to review and discuss internal audit reports issued since the last meeting. The meeting adjourned at 3:44 p.m. Madam Rector, I move the report of the audit committee be accepted.
Thank you, Mr. Falcon. Is there a second? Thank you. Any comments or questions? All those in favor? Any opposed? All right, thank you. Next is finance and physical development, Mr. Rothenberger.
Thank you, Rector. The Finance and Physical Development Committee heard the following reports at the meeting on September 15th, 2022. First was the financial review. The university's revenue and expenditures for the 2021-2022 fiscal year exceeded the university's budget expectations. Next, we went to the 2021-2022 receivables write-offs. The university annually writes off accounts that have been deemed uncollectible. The write-offs were well within the board's established guidelines. Next was the revised 22-23 budget, and the revised 22-23 budget totaled $684.8 million. The total increase from the previous year was 6.7%, which was largely attributed to the university receiving new state resources during the legislative process, for which the university is very appreciative. Next up was the 2023-2024 budget requests. The university's proposed budget request includes $1.2 million for growing Commonwealth healthcare needs, an additional $605,449 for the new information technology major, and $478,143 for student mental health services. Next up was the review of the 6-year plan update. Institutions are required by the Higher Education Opportunity Act of 2011 to amend or affirm the plan in an even numbered year. Estimated fiscal year 2023-24 expenditure changes included academic strategies of $1.7 million, financial strategies for state mandated salary increase costs of $8.6 million, student financial aid of $6 million, and technology integration costs of $500,000. The plan also included projected tuition and fees increases to cover the 6-year plan cost. The board is reminded that the 6-year plan is a planning document only, and by approving the amended 6-year plan, they are not approving tuition and fees for the 2023-24 academic year. The amended 6-year plan update can be found in the full board binder. On motion from the committee, I move the annual 6-year plan update be approved.
Thank you, Mr. Rothenberger. Is there a second?
Second.
Oh, I don't need a second. Thank you. for the reminder. All those.
Next, I got
Do I
We'll still have to.
I still have to
Vote
vote.
on it.
Yeah, thanks. So all those in favor,
Aye.
any opposed? All right, so moved.
Next up was the Workforce Planning and Development Report. JMU is required to complete the Virginia Department of Human Resource Management Workforce Planning and Development Report annually. Yes, it's a long one. Rick Larson, Assistant Vice President for Human Resources Training and Development, shared the report with the committee. The report was summarized and included the current economy's impact on hiring and a plan to minimize employee turnover. Then the committee went into closed session, we met, and no action was taken. Madam Rector, I move the report of the Finance and Physical Development Committee be accepted.
Thank you, Mr. Rothenberger. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? All those in favor? Any opposed? Right, thank you very much. Mr. Grass, Governance Committee.
Thank you, Madam Rector. We had a very productive meeting yesterday. So I have a lot to cover. The Governance Committee met at 4:30 p.m. Yesterday and discussed the following items. The committee reviewed a summary of the main themes and suggestions from April's board retreat. This information will be shared with the respective university administrators and the board committee chairs to consider when organizing board committee agendas for the rest of the year. The committee also reviewed the results of the board self-evaluation survey, concluding the overall feedback was quite positive, though some areas of focus were identified, most specifically around improving communications and ensuring every board member is engaged to share their ideas and perspective. The committee will also discuss considerations for changes to the next self-evaluation. The full results of that self-evaluation survey will also be shared with all board members. The committee then reviewed the report of the Partners Group 2022 College Governing Board Accountability Assessments, which is an independent organization that shared feedback on the themes of board transparency, accessibility, and receptiveness. We will be, based on some of the ideas suggested, we are moving to adopt a few. We will be immediately implementing a few changes to be even more open with these 3 dimensions. These include that we will now promote all board meetings on JMU social media channels and include a request for public comments prior. We will now post the full board binder on the JMU webpage following each board meeting. And we will now indicate on the JMU website correspondence or public comment can be sent to the rector to make it even more clear the board is accessible to public comment at all times. I think these are all very good changes. We then had the committee review and confirm the qualifications and competencies of JMU board members, which was shared with the full board at our last meeting and also was included on page 21 of your board binders. Madam Rector, on motion from the committee, I move the full board approve this document to be included in the board manual with just one change, amending the term critical mass to a majority of the board members are JMU alumni.
Thank you, Mr. Grass. Any comments or questions? All right, all those in favor? Any opposition? All right, thank you so much.
All right, we got 2 more motions coming, people. So
There
be
we
ready. All right, the committee also
Busy.
the committee also reviewed the proposed changes to the board manual that were included on pages 22 and 23 of your board binders. Madam Rector, on motion from the committee, I move the full board approve the policy for all virtual meetings, the remote participation requirements, and the change from 10 days to 7 days for motions or resolutions to be sent.
Thank you, Mr. Grass. Any comments or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? So moved.
And just for those in the room, these changes are reflective of new legislative changes that now allow, in some circumstances, for board or board members to attend virtually. So prior to that, we could not hold virtual meetings, except for an exception during COVID. So creates a little bit more flexibility. Related to these changes, though, the committee discussed expectations for attendance at board meetings and recommends that this change be added to the manual under section 11 meetings. The purpose of this is to just make it clear that we're not trying to go all virtual all of a sudden, that the expectation is board members attend in person, unless one of those exceptions, really is relevant. So the specific language would be all board members are expected to attend all meetings in person, consistent with provisions in the board manual. On motion from committee, I move the board approve this addition to the manual. Sorry.
All right, thank you, Mr. Grass. Are there any comments? This is one item that was not distributed out to the board in advance. So I did want to just open it up and suggest if anyone had any comments or questions about why we have decided that this was a really good addition to the manual. And we thought it was pretty straightforward, but it is unusual that we would bring something to the board without distributing it. Okay, very good. So all those in favor? Any opposition? All right, thank you very much. So moved.
All right, almost done. Finally, the committee began the discussion on a possible theme and agenda for our next board retreat in 2023. We also discussed some of the resources we may leverage. Please mark your calendars. The plan is currently to have that on the Saturday following our April board meeting. So that's April 22nd of next year. If any of the board members has a conflict, please let me know so we can see if we might be able to make adjustments to accommodate. Madam Rector, I move the report of the governance committee be accepted.
Thank you, Mr. Grass. Is there a second?
Seconded.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Thank you very much. So moved.
Thank you.
I would like to note, everyone should have a list of all the upcoming board meetings for not only 22, but all the way through 24, 23, which would include board retreats. So they are published on our website, but I would just make sure you have one. Thank you very much. Next up, student affairs.
Good morning, everyone. So Student Affairs Committee met yesterday, had lots of good discussion and received several reports. We first received an update from Vice President of Student Affairs, Dr. Tim Miller. Dr. Miller provided an overview of the last several months, including weeks of welcome, move-in, the launch of sort of 2 nationally recognized mental health instruments, Timely Care and Cognito. And we created a coalition to end sexual violence at JMU. We also talked about the Alcohol Council and the President's Committee on Health and Well-being. He shared with us updates on training related to Adams Law, which focuses on hazing prevention, and also a campus-wide partnership with athletics about civility and fan behavior at sporting events. That was from Dr. Miller. We next heard from our Student Government Association President, Shadi Bakhtiari. Shadi shared with us that the Student Government Association really wants to focus this year. Of course, they have several legislative issues that they're always working on as SGA, but they really want to focus also on strengthening relationships with senior administration and faculty, and want to work to help facilitate campus unity. To grow more, to just focus on that, so that will continue to grow and be an emphasis. Then we heard from our student representative to the Board of Visitors, Xavier Williams. Xavier shared with the committee updates regarding the work he hopes to complete this semester. He also participated in the weeks of welcome, other events across campus. He wants this year to utilize the climate study results to create sustainable solutions on campus. So anyway, always enjoy hearing that. And we know that one of his emphasis is moving forward. He shared that with us at our last meeting as well. For the remainder of the meeting, really the focus was on mental health and well-being. We know that's a big topic, interest, concern now at JMU and across the country. So we heard from the health and well-being section within student affairs. So we heard from 2 of the administrators, and we also heard from a panel of students. So I'll give you some of that information. So one thing is that the health and well-being division within student affairs logged over 835,000 student visits during the 21-22 school year, just a phenomenal undertaking. There are new efforts to address this crisis. They include creation of a Presidential Health and Wellbeing Council. And I mentioned, and Dr. Miller talked about this also, the national instruments available, organizations available to us, Timely Care, which gives us more virtual mental health services available to campus. They also adopted a specific approach to suicide prevention. And they joined a national suicide prevention training module as well. That's available for all staff and students. And I guess sort of a logistics change very important that was made, that fences have now been installed on all the campus parking decks. We have a new dean of students within student affairs, and she talked about one major change that she made was extending the hours of operation to provide support services to students in the after hours. This is a preventative measure to address more issues in real time before students get to the point where they're experiencing true mental health crisis. So then we went into the panel discussion with the 4 students. Dr. Miller has been really great about bringing those groups of students before the Student Affairs Committee. And some of those students represented UREC, or the University Rec students, University Rec Center, Dean of Students, represented from the Dean of Students Office, the Counseling Center, and University Health Center. They share their experiences as members, as clubs and organizations on campus, what they have done to work with students, and the promoting a sense of belonging seemed to be a theme that was recurring in our discussion, which means that's what's happening on campus. Active Minds, Core and Connect were some organizations that they are involved with. We heard about their volunteer experiences and work that they do as well, particularly during the pandemic, and some shared how they were felt like they were seeing some feedback from students that their conversations and programming was helpful to them. They talked specifically about their work in the counseling center, not only working with students, but just working and interacting with professional staffs, and how the professional staffs and students support each other. And at UREC, or University Rec Center, there is also programming there related to mental health and well-being, and one of the students had incorporated a program specifically to get more students involved. And then one of the students talked about his development of a health and wellness initiative to create more peer-to-peer mental health support, which was being received well. Madam Rector, I know the report of the Student Affairs Committee, please.
Thank you, Mrs. Johnson. Is there a second?
Second.
All those any comments or questions?
I'd just like to make a comment. President Alger, just to commend you, these students were very well prepared, and you could tell that they really owned it, and they were very supportive of their peers. So it was a very well spent time to listen to them. So thank you so much for your commitment.
Thank you, Terry. I similarly felt that panel was very, very well done. I always love having an opportunity to hear from students, and they continue to just inspire me. Really, really amazing. All those in favor of accepting the report?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. I would also, before going to the president's report, just like to thank those board members who have stepped up into the chair positions this year. I do recognize it's another level of time and commitment, so I want to just let you know how I appreciate it. Additionally, the liaisons to each of the committees, I fully understand the time and thought that goes into preparing all those materials, including your staff. So wanted to appreciate all the materials that go into putting this into those committees. All right, with that, I will turn it over to the president. The president's honor.
Thank you.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Great to see you all and thank you for being here as we start out a new academic year. And it's been an exciting year for James Madison University, as you'll see, hopefully during my report. I think you'll see some consistency in themes from what you've been hearing in the committee reports. I do want to encourage the board members, because I'll touch on a lot of things quickly in the interest of time, but please, if you have questions or comments throughout, just interrupt. I want this to be as conversational as possible. So with that, we can go ahead and get started, Donna. So first, I wanted to just give you an update on how we're doing with the incoming class of 2026 already. Hard to imagine. You'll see that the first year class right now, the number stands at 4,860 students, which was well over our target, which is really important for budgetary purposes. So we're really pleased about that. And it's over in terms of in-state and out of state. So that's really important from a budgetary perspective. You see there the first year class demographics, 23% represent underrepresented minority groups, 14% are first generation to go to college. They represent 41 states and 70 countries. And again, that's just the first year class. And of course, a good healthy number of transfer students as well. And speaking of first generation students, this is a really important population to us as we think about access and opportunity in higher education. We're trying to make sure that we provide opportunities for students who would be the first members of their family to go to college. And so here, you see we have a brand new center for first generation students, which is located next to the Centennial Scholars Office over in the Student Success Center. And it provides space for resources, programs, and meetings. It's going to be a great gathering place for first generation students. And by the way, we have a lot of faculty and staff who were first generation college students that work with these students as well. Okay, then. You've already heard about this topic of health and well-being, which is going to continue to be a major focus for us going forward. That Cognito training, the first thing you see mentioned here on the slide, is for all faculty, staff, and students. It's an interactive training that helps you to think about how you have difficult conversations about these issues and understand better when there might be signals that you need to pay attention to in terms of mental health concerns. It helps students get to the right resources on campus. So very worthwhile. I've already done it, as have many of my colleagues, and it's certainly eye-opening to think about how you engage in these difficult conversations. You've already heard about timely care. This is a big deal. This represented a contract that we entered with several of our other peer institutions in Virginia so that we could enter collectively and made it more affordable for all of us. And of course, the idea here is, particularly with telehealth, that there are moments, student might be in crisis or need to talk to someone, and it might be 10 p.m. on Friday night. The counseling center might not be open, right? But they need to talk to someone. And the telehealth is basically 24/7 support. So it's a really important addition to our suite of services here at the university. The Office of Residence Life has gotten additional training because those students are often on the front lines, right? If you're living in the residence halls, that's where you encounter a lot of these situations, and you can be really important as a first person to talk to someone about the resources available to them on campus and encourage them to utilize those resources. And nationally, there's this new 988 number for suicide prevention, which does work on campus as well. You may have heard about that. That was rolled out nationwide just recently. So a lot going on here. We also have a university-wide task force that's going to be talking about these issues this year. So we anticipate much more to come, but this is a national conversation and certainly a conversation here at the university. Was that a hand I saw, Chris? Yeah.
President Alger, is part of the Safe Talk training that the RAs are getting connecting students with timely care so that if they encounter someone that's in need of services, they can connect them with that organization?
Well, sir, yeah. Tim, did you want to say more since you?
Yeah, so the RAs are trained on how timely care works and they already know how to connect everybody to it. This is also just an additional second chance to know how to have that conversation with them about their current status and how they're feeling, and then help them with resources. But on top of that, all the RAs were made aware of what timely care was and how to access it. Great.
Thank you.
Any other comments on that? Okay, Don, so you'll hear more in a few moments about the university's move to National Research University status, that new Carnegie classification. And of course, part of that is being competitive for different types of federal grants as well as foundation and corporation grants and support. So just a couple of examples of things that have happened recently at the federal level. First, from the National Science Foundation, this STEM grant. And you see here, it's over $1 million to increase STEM degree completion of low-income undergraduates. So really important and helpful to us as we want to encourage students to go into those disciplines like biology and chemistry and physics. And it supports, as you see here, a variety of things, scholarships, absolutely, but also those close relationships with faculty mentoring, undergraduate research experiences, and then advising as well. So a really important grant for us. Okay, Don. And another federal grant that we learned of just recently from TRIO. TRIO is a set of federal programs that support low-income students, and they've been around for a number of years, but we were very excited for the first time to get a major TRIO grant. We actually have two of them now. Where is Rudy? There's Rudy back there who's done a lot of this work, Rudy Molina from Academic Affairs. But you see, this is again over $1 million specifically to support students in our local community. And again, aimed at first generation, low wealth or students with disabilities. It is out of the U.S. Department of Education. And speaking of the U.S. Department of Education, that picture, if you can tell, is with U.S. Secretary of Education Miguel Cardona, who is here in Harrisonburg this week. He's on a tour to talk about K-12 education, sort of recovering from the pandemic as we go forward. And he came to Harrisonburg in part because of all of the great work that's being done in the city school district with students from many different backgrounds. Most of you know that Harrisonburg is a refugee resettlement community. And specifically, we've had a chance to talk a little bit about the Valley Scholars Program, which of course is a pipeline for Harrisonburg and 6 other local public school districts to JMU and other colleges and universities where we provide full tuition scholarships for those students. So it was a really exciting opportunity to showcase what's happening right here in the Valley. Now, speaking of academic affairs, something else that we're always paying attention to is what are the academic needs of the future as we try to anticipate the workforce needs and the changes that are happening in the workforce. And that's where this new degree comes in information technology. It's a little bit different than, say, computer science or computer information systems, but it's broadly working with different forms of technology. You can see there are students working with software, hardware, and networks, and on cutting edge areas like the Internet of Things that we've all been talking about for a few years now, as well as robotics, autonomous vehicles, cybersecurity. It makes you want to go back to college, right? These are things that I'm showing my age did not exist when I was in college, but some really great opportunities. We anticipate that this major will grow quickly. It's in the College of Integrated Science and Engineering. So very excited that that got approved at the state level, and we now have students starting the program. Okay. Now, this next slide is just a sneak preview for what you will get at the next board meeting. But we spent a lot of time on this, so I'll just give a very, very high level. But one of the things we've tried to do in recent years, in response to questions about the value proposition for higher education, are the students getting the skill sets that they need? Are they getting gainfully employed after they graduated, leading meaningful lives? And we've actually done a lot of research on what's happening with our students after they graduate. COVID, of course, was challenging for all sorts of reasons, right? But you look at the class of 2021 and the career outcomes, and we're very pleased that our data show that well over 95%, and this is of undergraduates who graduated from JMU, were employed or pursuing an advanced degree. You see some of the top employers there, Deloitte, Centera, Innova Health Systems. By the way, if we include the graduate students, you would see on that list a lot of school districts, right? Because of course, the College of Education students are generally getting master's degrees. But if we added them, you would see a number of the school districts in Virginia. You see the graduates just in this one class working in 49 states. I think we didn't have anybody in, was it South Dakota? Am I remembering that right? So if you know of anybody who wants to move to South Dakota, so we can hit all 50, but that was just one class. But really impressive that they do have opportunities all across the country, across the world, and yet the majority do stay and work in Virginia, which is also important. And by the way, when we share the more complete data with you in November, what you're going to see is that the graduate level, the students getting master's and PhD degrees, have even higher percentages here in terms of the outcomes, and even higher percentage of them stay in state and work in the Commonwealth. So we are contributing a lot to the Commonwealth of Virginia. And the good news is this is across the board. And again, you'll see this in November, but all of the colleges, visual and performing arts and education, as well as science and math and the College of Arts and Letters, et cetera, they all have strong employment outcomes. And that's really important as people ask you about, well, what if someone majors in history or music? Are they getting jobs? And as we'll show you, the answer is unequivocally yes. And we have salary data, they're getting good salaries. So we have a very strong story to tell here about that return on investment. Now, speaking of how we're doing, of course, there are lots of national rankings out there, and this has been in the news recently because some of them just were released within the last few days and weeks. And just to give you a snapshot, now, there's always got to be a caveat when we talk about rankings, right? Because they use so many different criteria and methodologies that you can come up with very different results depending on what you're calculating. But just to give you a sense of how JMU is doing, Washington Monthly, which is one that a lot of people are paying more attention to now. We were number 51 nationally. And if you look here, the focus is on what we would call outputs or results, the social mobility of your students, the research that you're contributing, community and national service. So really important because that's not looking at inputs, that's looking at what are you doing to make an impact. So very excited to see that result. Stacker, another one, you see number 19 most cost effective in the country. And that's really important, again, when we talk about that return on investment. And you see there that they're looking at net price, alumni earnings, graduation rates, and student debt. And we do very well in those categories. And finally, US News and World Report, one of the most well-known of the ranking systems, often criticized, frankly, because they tend to focus a lot on inputs. They're starting to change their methodology slowly. And you'll remember this year, because we moved up to being a national research university, we are now in that top category with Harvard and MIT and all the major universities across the country. Number 2 among all public institutions in the United States. And again, keep in mind, publics include all the flagships and the land-grant universities. So we did very well there. Number 151 nationally overall. So we are very pleased with these results and certainly will continue to focus on what we do with students once we bring them in the door. Okay. Now, we've already heard mention of the state budget, but I just wanted to remind us that while we always have challenges, we always need more resources, we are extremely grateful for the investments that we saw this past year at the state level from the General Assembly. A really important moment for us to have those additional investments. Finally, there's been a recognition of the historic funding disparity. People often ask, well, why is JMU so low if you look on a per in-state FTE, full-time equivalent student basis? And a lot of that has to do with our history of having been an all-women's teachers college for a long time. Those are the schools that tended to be to get less funding per student because the assumption was you didn't need to spend as much to, sadly, for years to educate women and to produce teachers, right? But you look at JMU now, and of course, we have students across the board in many different disciplines. So we're really pleased that that finally is gaining traction at the state level, that they are recognizing the evolution of James Madison University, and will continue to make that case going forward. But I would ask for all of your help as we have those conversations. And I think you all know that we were able to hold tuition flat for our in-state students this year with a one-time scholarship. Again, thanks to the leadership of this board. And there were salary increases for faculty and staff, which we were really pleased about. It wouldn't be JMU if there wasn't some sort of construction update, right? You all, those of you that have been around for a while, know that there's always activity on campus. And just a few highlights of things that are going on right now or in the very near future. Carrier Library, we are preparing now for a complete renovation of that building. It needs it to be updated in terms of when you think about ADA type requirements and just the technology needs that students have in the 21st century. But it's also going to get a significant addition because, of course, it was built at a time when the university had far fewer students. And so even with Rose Library, we do need more space. So we have that new addition going on. The old Convocation Center, where we used to play basketball, is now being renovated. You see, it will house volleyball as well as indoor track and some team offices and new locker rooms. That will free up space in Godwin Hall for academic purposes, which will be really helpful. The Village Housing Project. Anybody here live in Village at some point in your, okay, so you all know why this is needed. We love the Village. It's a great location, but those buildings are dated, right? And they do need updating. This is a project you can't do all at once because you can't take all those beds offline, right? So it will be basically one building at a time, starting next year, where Eikenberry Hall will be the first one to come down and replaced with a 500-bed facility. There will be air conditioning, we promise. So that's something I know that students are really looking forward to. It's going to be a multi-year project, certainly, but one that is much needed. You see the softball stadium expansion. I think you all know the tremendous success that the softball team has had and the national recognition. If you've ever been to one of those games, there are people that bring their lawn chairs and go sit out in the field to try to watch the game. So we're excited about that. And then Centera Park, which is where soccer and some of the other sports play, you see also has an addition with new locker rooms and much better amenities for the teams there. Now, I want to mention quickly community engagement, because this is a part of our, those of you that are familiar with our strategic plan, you'll hear us talk about 3 different forms of engagement, right? Engaged learning, community engagement, and civic engagement. And on the community engagement front, there are many different ways in which we partner with the local community. I already mentioned something like Valley Scholars, which is a partnership with the school districts. Well, the Economic Development Council is a partnership and collaboration with the local business community, with local nonprofits, with the city and county governments to really focus on economic revitalization, especially coming out of COVID. And this is where JMU is acting as an anchor institution. That's a phrase that is commonly used in higher education, where you have that sense of place. You're not an isolated ivory tower, but you are contributing to the economic vitality of your region. So we're very excited about this. Nick Swartz, I don't know if he's here. There he is. Nick, thank you for your leadership of the Economic Development Council and of this whole effort. You see here through some meetings, we've had over 100 people a couple of times now on campus to work together. And these are the priority areas that have been identified that we're working on together: workforce development, transportation, housing, and childcare. Those are the top needs that we've identified for the local business community. And by the way, those are also issues that we care about right here at JMU with our own employees. So we're very excited. Nick, thank you for all the work that's done and again, for facilitating bringing all of us together in the community. Okay, Don? Now, this is again a sneak preview because you're going to be hearing from Andy and Sheila momentarily about the Comprehensive Unleashed campaign. But we do need to take a moment to say thank you. Thank you to everybody in this room and many people who are not with us this morning. This, of course, was a phenomenal undertaking, an 8-year campaign that raised over $250 million. The original goal, the consultant said, well, you know, you guys might be able to make it to 150. And then they saw how well things were going and said, well, you might be able to get past 200. And the team actually went past $250 million. Again, thanks to everybody in this room. And we finished strong. that's not typical with these campaigns. Usually, you're kind of petering out by the end because you've gone to all of your most likely suspects, if you will, but you see over 34, almost $35 million and over 18,000 donors in the final year of the campaign. So really, really proud of the team, and you'll hear more about that shortly. Okay. I wanted to mention just quickly investing in people, because we all know with all the great resources we have wonderful buildings and technology, but the most important asset at JMU is our people. And that is reflected in this particular national award that we just received. The Impact Program, for those of you that are newer to the board, is a program where we bring individuals from all across the university, all the different divisions, who are identified as potential future leaders. They're already providing leadership in various ways, but sort of getting additional leadership experience where they work as a cohort throughout the year on projects that have value to the university. It's a wonderful program. We do this in-house, and we've had hundreds of employees who have been through that. This is a national award from the American Association of State Colleges and Universities, and we are really excited to see that program recognized as a national model. And we'll be receiving that out in California in a few weeks. And again, it's an opportunity to share that story nationwide with higher education. And special thanks to Brian Charette, Sharon Lovell, and Brad Barnett, who provide leadership for that program, and Mark Warner, who many of you knew, not the senator, but Mark Warner, the former vice president of student affairs here, also helped provide leadership for a number of years here. One other form of engagement that I want to recognize, I mentioned earlier, is civic engagement. And many of you know this is a personal passion of mine, and certainly one at a university named for the father of the US Constitution. We have tremendous new leadership in the Madison Center for Civic Engagement. David is here. David, would you stand so everybody can see you? Thank you, David, for your tremendous leadership. And Kara Dillard has joined David there. The center and our efforts focus on things like free speech and civil discourse and voter and civic engagement. And this is an area where James Madison University is absolutely a national leader, working with other colleges to say, yes, we want to prepare students for the workforce, but we also want to make sure that they are ready to be engaged citizens in a democratic society. We cannot take that for granted. And let's see, yes, they did get distributed, it looks like. You all have this, a purple constitution. What better, right? This is something that, thanks to a generous donor, we now have that we're giving out to our students in general education as part of their American experience, which is part of Gen Ed. And we really want people to actually use this. So do take this home, study it. There'll be a quiz at the next board meeting. David, you'll run that, right? But this really is important to us, that we actually want to talk about how our society works and functions and what is our place in that. So we're really grateful that this is an important part of what we do here at the university. And again, thank you to David and Carol. Okay. Now, a couple of other new faces. Malika, where would you stand? Malika Carter-Hoyt is our new Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and Chief Diversity Officer for the university. Now, Malika, we try not to hold this against you, but some of you that have been around for a while and you know football, do you see where that degree came from? No state, but Malika, we love you anyway. She most recently worked in the SUNY system in upstate New York, and also was the inaugural, as you see, Chief Diversity Officer in Worcester, Massachusetts. And I especially want to thank Deborah Tompkins Johnson, who has helped us with onboarding here. So thank you, Deborah, for your leadership on that front. And Malika, welcome to the team. Glad to have you. And next, a face that is not new to James Madison University, but is new in her official title as Vice President for Administration and Finance. Tawana Moore, 23 years at James Madison University, has done a great job for us. So thank you, Tawana, for your great leadership. Okay. Now, the athletics update, you've already heard from the athletics committee about the move to the Sun Belt. I have to say they've been just terrific to work with. Heather was just the provost's meeting with her counterparts there to talk about academic collaborations. The presidents certainly work very well together. You know, of course, that football has already had some success. The Sun Belt as a conference had one of the biggest weekends ever last weekend for a quote unquote non-power 5 FBS conference, as you probably saw, knocking off 2 top 10 teams in the process. So this is going to be a super competitive league going forward, but the teams are doing well. And I did want to mention this sportsmanship focus you heard mention of is really important in the Sun Belt. You know, there's been a lot of how can we put it, less than sportsmanlike behavior across the country, and you see that lack of civil discourse in so many ways. And the Sun Belt is really trying to emphasize we want to treat one another with respect. Of course, we want there to be a lot of spirit at games, but we also want to be treating other teams and coaches and referees with respect. And so going forward, you're going to hear us continue to talk about that. So an important undertaking by the Sun Belt, and I appreciate their leadership on that front. Okay. And finally, something that you've all been very good at doing, including for today, but there is a national initiative called College Colors Day that kicked off this month. And the idea is asking everybody associated with the university, faculty, staff, students, and yes, board members, to wear your purple on Fridays whenever you can. It's a great way to start conversations. If you've got good pictures, send them to our team here to put on social media. But this is a great way to show your pride and to get people interested in James Madison University. And so with that, Madam Rector, that concludes my report. I'm happy to take any additional questions or comments.
John, I'm just a statement. I wanted to commend you for the impact award. It made me think about a dinner I had with 2 of the deans a long time ago, and I was kind of just getting started, but sort of asked them, you know, what was different about JMU and what was a competitive advantage for JMU. And when they thought about it, they said, one of the things that they said was, here the leadership is collaborative, and you'd be shocked at how uncollaborative the leadership is at most universities. I had no idea, I had no other frames of reference except ours, but I do think that doesn't get recognized that much, that it's different here, that leadership is super collaborative in nature, and that contributes to making JMU, I think, a different special place.
Well, thank you, John, for sharing that. And I think that's a reflection of the fact that all of these accomplishments, the things that are happening, it's all a team effort, right? There's no one individual that could possibly do all of these things alone. And that's something I think that we've all recognized with the resources that we have. I think JMU does extremely well. And it's because I think we all know that we need each other. We need the different strengths and skill sets that people bring to the table. So thank you.
All right.
That concludes my report.
Thank you very much, President Alger. Next on the agenda is a dashboard update. I would like to ask Chris Oram, Director of Strategic Planning and Engagement, to please come up and make a presentation. A little bit of background for the new board members. Over the last year and a half, the strategic plan is something that the board has been very, very focused on. It is a very lengthy document, over 200 pages if you get the full list. Even a summary comes down to a pretty lengthy document. So we have challenged the administration to try and pick some of the key metrics that could be put together to visually portray what is some of the data that we could be looking at as a board and as a community to be able to see progress against the strategic plan. So the administration was very patient in working with the board as we went through several iterations of this dashboard. But I think we're at a place where it's something we're going to build upon going forward versus refine and reinvent. So we appreciate all the patience that went into actually developing this. I've heard lots of very positive feedback from the board members about the dashboard, how much they appreciate what it represents and the work that goes into it, as well as how informative it is and easy for us to use, which is really critical. So with that, I will hand it off to Chris Oram to give us an update to the dashboard.
Thank you for that, and good morning. It's great to see so many of you and for the new board members, welcome. As Madam Rector said, my name is Chris Orm. I'm the Director of Institutional Research, but a lot of my work is geared in the strategic planning area of the university. And so I'm always love to come up and talk about data. As many of you, those who work with me do. And I do feel a little sheepish because I know the president just talked about wearing purple, and I realize I'm wearing a blue tie. And I just feel like I need to address that. What meeting I've been to where I haven't worn purple. So what I wanted to do, and I appreciate that overview because that saves a little bit of time for what I was going to talk about. The one thing I do want to mention in terms of an update is last year when my team worked to develop the tool that I'll show you in a minute, we did it based off of a lot of the feedback that was given by this by the board and other senior leaders, and we then worked to take the version that we created that had a lot of aspirational targets and different worded metrics, and then work with our university planning team, which is a group across campus that has faculty, staff, and student representation, to and also works with the strategic plan performance measures and reconcile those two. There was a lot of overlap. We developed this because a lot of our important metrics are our strategic plan performance measures, but because there were some nuanced differences between the two sets of measures, we wanted to make sure that they align. And so the work in the spring was meant to consolidate those into one set of measures. So we now call it the strategic plan performance measures, and that's what I'll show you guys. So if you've used the tool before off of the BOV site, it's got a different location now, and I just wanted to be able to show that. So if you just have to type in strategic plan measures. Okay. Spell correctly. That's the first thing that pops up. So the first thing you would get is just a page that gives you an update of how the site is organized, and it breaks up all the different measures. It describes how the measures are broken into the different strategic priorities of the university. There's also another section that has metrics related to the university's vision on engagement. And then there are two additional sections of metrics that are, we call them additional metrics of importance. And those are ones that maybe don't have targets associated with them. Some of them are out of our control, state funding, things of that nature. But they're important metrics either the board has mentioned as wanting to see, or that members of senior leadership feel like they need to be there. And so there is a separate section for those measures as well. And so just by clicking on that, so this is the tool itself. And what I just wanted to share was just a highlight of 1 or 2 measures per area, and then field any questions that folks may have from any of the other areas, but just to give everyone an overview of some of the differences and where we are now, and also recognizing that for some of these, we are right in the middle of some of our major updates for our data of the year. Our fall enrollment is wrapping up, and so we're in the process of getting all that data ready for updates. So in November and really in October, this will be updated with a lot of additional information from this fall. So I'll share some updates from what we have since the last time we spoke, but just know that there's a lot of updating that will happen from now until the next board meeting as well. So the president mentioned in his remarks, this is one of the first metrics that comes up, and it's aligned with that information from the University Career Center about the success of our graduates. So this is looking at the outcome rate of our undergraduates, and there's another one right below it that mirrors it for our graduate students. And this just provides a sense of what our targets are, what our target is for what percent of our students would want to have a positive career outcome 6 months after graduation, and then where that actually is. And you can see that there is a dip here. I do want to address it because, as you can see, this is from the class of 2020. Right, so this is what happens. You can see in a lot of the information where there is going to be some dips right around the time of the pandemic, especially on things like internship rates or other ones that really relied on maybe in-person experiences. But here you can see that, but you can also see how we bounce back. This is the most recent data available. So our year, as the president mentioned, about 96% of our undergrads had a positive career outcome within 6 months of graduating. And I know that the print is small and the intent is just to, again, share this. But you can also see that we try to, whenever possible, put some context on the slide. So the only other thing I wanted to mention on this one is this is an example of the old strategic plan performance measures before we reconciled with the metrics from last year, had this target at 90%. So this is an example where we took a good hard look at where we've been and what we think we can achieve, and we tried to set a target that was higher and more aspirational. And so it's at up to 97% now is what our goal is for that. Just want to share on the second priority. This is one looking at DEI initiatives and what we do to work in that area. And this primary measure here looks at the percentage of our undergraduate students from underrepresented groups. We've set the lofty target of trying to reach 33% of our undergraduate body be classified as underrepresented by 2026. And we define underrepresented the way that Chev has defined it. And so it looks not just at race and ethnicity, but also at students who are older when they start, so 25 or older when they begin their career at JMU. It also includes students who have received a Pell Grant, as well as students who come from a county or city that are in the lowest quintile of educational attainment in the state. And so if a student meets any one of those characteristics, they're classified as underrepresented and then included in this data. And again, we've got that target of 33% that we think is aspirational, but also realistic. And then just to note, as you'll see, sometimes what we try to do is we do the supporting measures align with those different characteristics. So if you were curious, this is the overall look. But if you were interested in how many students were 25 or older, or were students who identified as BIPOC, for instance, you can go down and see how that shapes out and what's kind of driving the larger number of the primary measure. So all of these will be updated within the next few weeks as we finalize that information as well. The third area, this is an important one. They're all important, but this one looks at the metrics that we use to establish our Carnegie classification, which obviously has been a top priority for the university. And what we have used here was looking at the two characteristics that Carnegie uses to classify institutions as national. So the number of doctoral degrees conferred, as well as the research expenditures. And Carnegie sets a minimum target for that. And so as we have worked to meet that goal and that target of becoming a national university, becoming an R2, we wanted to make sure that our sites were set on that minimum requirement, make sure that we were going to be well above that. Now that we've attained that, our goal is to maintain. So we'll be looking over the next several months at what are realistic targets now moving forward in both of these areas that go above and beyond the minimum, but are still realistic for what we can achieve. The fourth one is looking at strengthening support and infrastructure. And the one I just wanted to point out here, there are several in here, but this is looking at the 3-year rolling average for fundraising. And again, you can see a big spike in the 21-22 numbers that actually put our 3-year average, which is the purple line, above the target. So the target was 22 million. And so with the strong fundraising year we had last year, now we are above that target. So this is an example of one of those metrics where we will, then I'll reach out to Nick and his team to say, what can be, what would a new target look like now? This is an example of where we've actually hit the target ahead of schedule. And so this gives us an opportunity to reevaluate and consider a new target maybe moving forward, assuming that these, with the idea that these strong fundraising years are going to continue. Finally, in terms of the strategic measures, we got the vision and the metrics related to that. We have another year worth of high impact practices. There's a method that is used out of our Center for Assessment and Research Studies that looks at what are the average, a good estimate of the average number of high impact practices that our students go through. And we were actually expecting this number to go down this past year as you think about things like study abroad and you think about other high impact practices that important experiences, student experiences, but maybe were affected largely by the pandemic. But this number actually stayed constant and actually increased a little bit because of work that was done to improve in other areas and other HIPs that all students go through, like seminar style courses. So we're actually able to keep the overall number stable, even though maybe some subcategories like study abroad are still recovering from the pandemic.
And Chris, we might just say a word, because this, I know this is maybe new lingo to some of you, but this idea of high impact practices is really important in higher education. This means that learning is very active, not passive, right? It's not just sitting in class, taking notes, listening to lectures, but it is things like study abroad, experiential learning and internships, community service learning, undergraduate research, capstone projects, teamwork that students are doing. So very active learning practices. There's a lot of research that shows that that can be really transformational in terms of how students learn and how they're being prepared for the workforce and for their lives. So that's why this is so important to us. It's one of the cornerstones, if you will, of the strategic plan, is to have a lot of those high impact practices across the entire curriculum. So no matter what major you're in, you would be engaging in high impact practices. So just wanted to make sure people understood what that is.
Thank you. Thank you for that. The only other one I wanted to show in here is based on, we've had this measure for a while, but the renewed interest and the priorities of the Youngkin administration on increasing the number of internships. I just wanted to highlight that we do have an internship related metric, that this is something we've been tracking. To date, though, it's only focused on what we know we have a good handle on in terms of counting, which is these 4 credit internship experiences. And so one of the things that we're working on as an institution is how do we, one, better and more fully define this area of internships? How do we better track and count those students? And then how do we improve the overall experience so that we can increase the number of those opportunities? And there's a task force that is starting up this fall to look at all of those. So you'll see some differences in this one in particular as we look to expand that definition and our ability to track this really key initiative, both for the institution, but also for the administration as well. And then finally, I just wanted to highlight, these are the areas on the far right of this tool where it's looking at these additional metrics that aren't necessarily strategic plan measures, but they're still important metrics that are worthy of consideration and things that are important to kind of watch and see how the trends evolve over time. So they involve a series of financial metrics. This is looking at the overall budget as well as things related to state funding. And then down the line here, it also, sorry for all this scroll, athletic success metrics. So we have several in here. We expect these to change as well in a period of changes we enter into our competition with the Sun Belt. But just one of the things that I always like to highlight is our 6-year graduation rates of our student athletes. And this just is a reminder that the athletes here are not just athletes, but they're students as well. And you can see that the athletic success rate for our students is it reached 90% in the most recent round of data. And I think that's an important key to point out. So that first section has finance and athlete metrics. And then this last one just has a series of admissions related trends as well as enrollment related trends. So we'll have some of these numbers that put some preliminary numbers in here, but we'll have those finalized within the coming weeks as well, related to admissions rates, acceptance rates, and then also you can see here our enrollment over time, and there's other ones related to those areas. So again, this was meant to both provide an update on where we are and some of these key metrics, as well as just provided a chance for any questions or comments that you all may have about this tool. Yeah.
Chris, thank you. You know, I'm a fan of the dashboard. I've been since its first iteration, but I just want to say thank you for tying it into the strategic plan. That makes our jobs a lot easier when those metrics are actually tied into strategic priority areas. So I appreciate you all doing that.
Yeah, thank you.
Chris, I would also like to, sorry, you had mentioned that it was getting relocated. Is it possible to keep a link on the Board of Visitors page for ease of access to the new location?
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect, thank you. Terry, did you have a question?
Just a comment, I thought it was so well done. I actually saved it on my home, my home computer. And I really appreciate the comment that you made, Chris, is tying it to the strategic plan really adds value. So it's great. A suggestion or just something to think about is an executive summary. So like a first page that you could see everything and then see, are we green on top of it or yellow or, are we off? So from a system standpoint, we could have a quick look. And I love the fact that you have the strategic objectives and also the operational indicators. So very well done.
Okay.
Just one area of concern that I have is, I think that the data is fantastic. One area that we still remain stagnant in is our diversity, equity, and inclusion. I know that we're looking at 2026 going to 33%, but looking at that 4-year plan, we just stayed the same. And looking at the jump in the 4-year period before that, it took us 4 years to get there. So it's almost looking like we're 8 years away. So what things do we really need to do and look at to increase those numbers?
And we'll be able to look and see whether or not it remains stable in a few weeks, whether or not we do see an increase as well with that. So we may have some indication of whether or not that trend is continuing or whether or not we're moving in a direction. I've looked at anyone in this area. I know I'm not going to call on Dr. Carter White yet, but I think I know that especially if we continue to stay stable there. And again, it's important to note that it's a multi-tier. There's a lot of work being done to try to increase the number of, for instance, percent of Pell students, as well as some of those other areas. And so I think that it will be a point of conversation, and that would be something that I would point out to the senior leaders if we remain stable on that once we have the next round of data to try to come up with whether or not that target is on point or it needs to be adjusted.
Yeah, and Chris, maybe just a couple of points. This is obviously a multifaceted approach. There's no one solution, right? There are a lot of things you've got to work on, but certainly financial aid is really critical because we know in the applicant pool, we're getting the students. We know they're getting accepted, but where the numbers fall is when they actually matriculate. And the number one reason, based on our research, is the lack of sufficient financial aid. So that's why you'll see that there's a lot of focus on trying to improve financial aid for students. We're doing a lot of additional outreach and including outreach, not just to seniors in high school, but to reach students at an earlier age to get them to be familiar with JMU, bringing them to campus. Because again, we know if we get students on campus, they are much more likely to come here. So you think about all the summer camps, again, COVID was a huge disruption for those types of activities, but we're back to doing that now. If you were at the first football game, you would have seen hundreds of students on the field with the Marching Royal Dukes because there was a band camp where they invite students from all around the Commonwealth and beyond to join them. So being very intentional about that kind of outreach to school districts that maybe have historically not sent us as many students. I don't know, Don, if you want to say anything from the admissions perspective.
For example, the middle school program visitation is a key factor for us. Again, and for the last 2 years in COVID, there were no visits from middle schools because obviously they didn't send their students. So I've recently moved the middle school coordinator position into the admissions office. And so that person can work more directly in terms of, again, scheduling those middle school visits, getting those students back on campus, as well as that opportunity to talk to them about higher education and JMU in particular. That's one of the things that we're doing. We have an emphasis on the Pell eligible. The work of the Warden Challenge and the Women for Madison scholarships have been key in some expendable dollars to help us initially, but we're also working again on some of the endowments to help us get some of those Pell eligible students. Financial aid has revamped some of their scholarship criteria so that we can hopefully more identify some of those students and get them some of those dollars that they might need. So the scholarship factor is just a strong factor in terms of getting some of these underrepresented populations. But it is also going back and getting them connected in middle school. Our PIR program also is back up and running again and connected in the schools to again help people to start to think about that opportunity for higher education.
And that's professors and residents.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Craig, the Warden Challenge loan, I just heard the data last night that That allowed 50 Pell eligible students to start this year alone. It will allow an additional 50 to start next year. That data then goes into the state calculations for state funding for those Pell eligible students. So that one initiative alone will increase the numbers by over 100 over the course of the next 2 years, which is, fantastic. But that's just one illustration of how challenges like the Warden Challenge can dramatically impact, how things operate on the first thing.
Quick question. Just as we're looking at some of these data points and thinking back to conversations we were having at the retreat, I'm interested when we're looking at some of this data, are we connecting this to some of our peer institutions? And interested to just know where do we kind of align in terms of, especially talking about the R2. Is that a portion that we talked about, or is this just something we're focused on being?
When it's relevant, we've absolutely looked at peer institutions. I'll give you 2 examples as we look at our retention rate and our graduation rate and trying to set targets for those areas. We already have very high retention and graduation rate. But we were wanting to, and the university planning team worked on this, is well, how do we compare them against R2s? What is a reasonable and consistent group that we might compare ourselves to? So we looked, and when we compare ourselves against large public R2 institutions from the most recent classification, we're at the top for both retention rate as well as graduation rate, 6-year graduation rate perspective. So these targets may look like they're just kind of status quo, but they're also at the very top end of that particular peer group. And so we did take a look when relevant to other peers to say, how can we establish targets that are going to keep us competitive, if not at the top of our peer groups, and that language should be in these some of the descriptions as well. We try to add that if that was, so that's a great question.
Right. Clearly, you can see the board is still very, very interested and enthusiastic about your work. So thank you, Chris, for your update. All right. Next on the agenda is an update on the National University status. I'd like to call on Heather Holtman, our Provost and Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs, and Anthony Tongan, Vice Provost of Research and Scholarship. So welcome. Thank you.
Good morning. We're really happy to be here. Some of what we're going to say will tie back to things you've heard from Chris and certainly things you've heard from the president. Everything is so linked together in the work that we're doing. So I hope it starts to make a lot of good sense to you. So some of this might be repetitive, as you all know. In February this past year, JMU was designated the R2 doctoral university with high research activity by the Carnegie Commission. So to provide you with a little context, I'd like you to see the short video that captures our excitement in reaching this status, especially for our new board members. This will be, I think, a really nice example of what this means to us.
I started my presidency at James Madison University very deliberately with a listening tour, asking people the question, why Madison? What makes this a special place to live and learn and work? And I got a lot of interesting responses, but most of them really focused on the relationships here at James Madison University, the very close faculty-student interaction both in and outside the classroom, that emphasis on individuals and getting that kind of personalized attention. Often you only see that at smaller liberal arts colleges. At major research universities, especially undergraduates, sometimes get lost. So it was important to me and to the university as we continued to grow and evolve that we would not lose that emphasis on personal relationships. And when I think about this evolution to be a national research university, part of what makes JMU truly special is that we are continuing to combine the very best elements of what you see at those small liberal arts colleges. We do have that sense of community. We do have those close relationships between faculty and students. And yet, we also have the research opportunities that you typically see at much larger research institutions. And we have great graduate programs at the master's level and, of course, now at the PhD level as well. But what makes JMU different and quite unique in American higher education is we've never lost our focus on those personal relationships, on the importance of the teaching function.
JMU faculty are deeply committed to the teacher-scholar modeling that they provide to our students. Not only are they deeply committed to their classwork, but it's outside of class. It's what happens in that engagement and the conversations, in their interactivity, and the mentorship and advising they provide. And we know that this is the case because our students tell us about this. The students tell us about the incredibly valuable and deep relationships they maintain with faculty long after they graduate. And we know that the faculty value this part of their role because of the way that they value their time and the way they spend their time, the way they talk about teaching, the way they talk about their students. It's very distinctive here. So since February, we've had... I love seeing Kathy up all day. We didn't know she was going to be speaker when we made the video, so that's great. So in the past 6-7 months, we've continued to track and discuss those two metrics Chris described that Carnegie uses to define an R2, the research expenditures and the number of doctoral degrees awarded. But more importantly, our conversations are focused on the future. And these three questions: what do we want JMU to look like in 2032, in 2042? And what do we need to do now to bolster and support the research and graduate enterprises so that we can not only sustain, but expand our impact and our reach? And finally, how do we most effectively maintain and invigorate a competitive edge in the crowded arena of 94 public R2 national universities across the country? There's only one other in Virginia, by the way, it's William & Mary. And also throughout the global higher education marketplace. So we're looking at those 94 public R2s, and we want to know where we measure up. So we're honing in on these questions driven by the University Strategic Plan, and you've seen quite a bit of that from Chris, specifically in priorities number 1, being the change at work and in the world, priority number 3, attracting the students of tomorrow, and number 4, strengthening support and infrastructure. Now, within academic affairs, we have just finalized our own strategic plan that nests beautifully under the university strategic plan. And we go even further in articulating the key performance indicators for the graduate school, which is led by Dean Linda Thomas, who's here. Give us a wave, Linda. And also for the Office of Research and Scholarship, led by Vice Provost Anthony Tongan. We're currently engaged in an audit and analysis of the resources that are allocated to these endeavors. And it's early, but we already know that existing resources are going to have to be strategically aligned and allocated in order for us to be thriving and competitive in this national landscape. So in this slide, what you can see is that every year since 2012, we've easily reached Carnegie's benchmark of awarding 20 or more research doctoral degrees. Chris already shows you some of this. Our commitment to these programs is already deeply embedded and shows that we are at a steady state. We graduate between 35 and 40 doctoral candidates annually, and we're very comfortable with these numbers. We know we can sustain them. We know that the doctoral degrees are what are counted by Carnegie for the R2 status, but they're only one piece of the larger graduate enterprise. So I want to tell you a little bit more about the entire graduate enterprise because this is important to the whole campus. We are seeing, if we can go to the next slide. Yes, we are seeing in this across the board growth in applications for our programs and also in enrollment for all of our graduate programs. And this tightly links the graduate school's work and the entire campus. So keep this in mind, the vast majority of our faculty are housed in units in academic departments that offer undergrad, master's, and doctoral degrees. And the vast majority of our faculty teach across all those levels. We have 50% of our academic units that offer programs at the graduate level. So commitment to graduate education is very broad across this campus. The personnel, the space, the equipment, and other resources that are used by and generated by our doctoral programs continue to provide a scaffold and support for our undergrads and our master's and education specialist students as well. Also, it's good to know that we are addressing the Commonwealth needs in our graduate programs. We consistently fill cohorts in master's programs that address our high need areas, such as healthcare, such as teaching, and in a particular high need area in Virginia and of course across the nation is in mental health. JMU is widely known for its counseling programs, and we're seeing a large increase in applications for the PhD in counseling and supervision. We also have a new doctorate that is right now in front of Chev. Some of you heard about it yesterday in the academic committee meeting. It's an educational doctorate that Mark and his team have put together, and we hope to get that ready to launch very soon. So given all of these strengths already across the graduate enterprise, our focus in the near future is a steady improvement in the quality of the graduate experience, particularly in the supports for our doctoral students. So in the academic affairs strategic plan, our objective is to ensure the competitiveness and sustainability. And as I said, we're auditing and analyzing all of the underlying support infrastructure in the grad school as well as the academic units that manage the programs. We know that we need additional faculty members to maintain that close faculty-student interactivity that the president articulated so well in the video. And we know that that's very critical in doctoral as well. We know that we're going to have to make some strategic choices to support our doctoral programs. We're also going to be analyzing the amount of doctoral stipends and research support funding for those students to ensure that we're competitive. Some of this is personal. My middle son is a doctoral student at Rutgers. And so when he was going through his application process, it was extraordinary to see how competitive these stipend packages can be. And I'd like us to be up there along with Rutgers when students are considering doctoral institutions. We also know that we want to be competitive in other support areas like providing health insurance for grad students, housing options for grad students, even potentially childcare options. And we've heard about that being a priority for the whole campus as well. So while we could accept more doctoral students now, certainly there's interest. For the next couple of years, we want to focus on shoring up all of those resources and infrastructure supports so that we are more solidly positioned to grow. Once we get a better handle on that, I have some ambitious goals. We're currently at just over 2,000 grad students. I think within the next 5 to 6 years, we could probably reach 2,500. I hope that makes Tawana happy because we hope that a lot of those students will come to us globally from out of state. And while certainly we provide them support, we know that they also return a great amount back to us in terms of their success. I also think that we will have some more doctoral programs on the docket. Certainly the education doctorate in Chev will be first up, but I've spoken to the deans and I think we could easily have another 3 or 4 new doctoral programs in the next 5 years or so. So these are goals that we're talking about in academic affairs. And we are wanting, first of all, as I said, to shore up our existing infrastructure and then start to grow by adding new programs and by looking at better supports for our doctoral students. So this gives you a little bit of an overview of the graduate enterprise. Anthony's now going to address the research enterprise.
Excellent, thank you. And as you've probably heard the term R2, that R stands for research. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about how that research ties into where we currently are and where we are heading. As you can see from this graphic and from Chris's earlier comments, JMU is well above the 5 million to be classified as a research doctoral institution. I want to emphasize that much like everything that I say that follows and everything that's kind of preceded as well, that all these things like research expenditures have increased due to a collaborative effort, not only in academic affairs and the leadership of Dr. Coltman, but also including all the divisions represented here at this table. Next slide. So where are we going? In addition to increased recognition that comes with the National University status and this R2 classification, we're moving forward in other ways. Due to our Carnegie classification, we're eligible to join the Association of Public and Land-Grant Universities. APLU has councils that enable senior public university leaders working in similar positions to come together to address critical issues. We are participating in the following councils: the Council of Presidents, President Alger, Council on Academic Affairs, Dr. Coltman, Council on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Dr. Carter Quick, Council on Strategic Communications, Mary Hope, is she here, Voss? Council on Student Affairs, Tim Miller, Council on Government Affairs, Ben Delp, who's in Research and Scholarship, and then Council on Research represent us. There were a lot of summer meetings where we got to get together with these other doctoral institutions, and they were extremely valuable. I know that for the Council of Research meeting, I benefited greatly from attendance and networking with new VPs for research. And one of the focus areas of the Council on Research is public impact research, which resonates very well with JMU's engagement mission. And so it really feels like we've found a home. And as we talk about R2, there's also an institutional task force on new institutional peers. What does it look like as JMU moves to this doctoral level? What does it mean for our peers? Who do we now look to and for comparisons, for aspirations, et cetera? And so we'll be a task force, a division-wide task force this year on that as well. Second point here is strategic resource incentivization. I think we've emphasized this a few different times. Since no new resources came with this move to R2, we've had to be extremely strategic with our current resources. I'm going to thank President Alger for the two examples that I was going to talk about. He already mentioned the College of Science and Mathematics, $1.4 million over 5 years for student support, and Rudy Molina's federal TRIO programs for 2 5-year grants, totaling over $2.6 million. So that's $4 million that we strategically invested in. I want to talk a little bit about the strategic investment, because that's where the Office of Research and Scholarship comes in. I work very closely with the Dean of the College of Science and Math. And how do we write these grants? How do we get the data together? And it is a team effort. Similar with Rudy Molina, we worked with a consultant to be able to help us with putting the proposal together and making a very competitive proposal. These are some of the behind the scenes things that go on that help those funding to occur. It of course is on the partnership with Rudy Molina and the College of Education and the federal TRIO programs, but also with the Dean Prinz and the College of Science and Mathematics and the STEM, National Science Foundation STEM. And that is how we're approaching many of these partnerships and elevating JMU's research and scholarship endeavors. I do want to say that not everything we do in the office is about external funding. For instance, the libraries and research and scholarship have launched a new pilot program to help faculty and staff with the cost of open access article publication charges. Open access publishing broadens readership and increases citations, which elevates faculty research, but also elevates JMU's reputation. The final thing on here is the research centers, and this is still under discussion, but we were working closely with academic affairs in all divisions to consider what it looks like in the next 10 or 20 years to think about research centers. So the development and expansion of research centers, and we'll share more ideas of that in the future as they start to solidify. In closing, last year before we were in R2, academic affairs put together a group to talk about what are the core commitments that JMU embraced that brought us to this point and which must be maintained during this R2 transition. And there were 4 things, and I want to emphasize them because I think you've heard them, but these are the things that as we move forward, we want to make sure that we're doing. Number 1, first-rate, research-focused and professional graduate programs. Number 2, high-quality, student-centered undergraduate education with a strong research, scholarship, and creative activities culture. Number 3, the centrality of teacher-scholar model that emphasizes students working closely with top faculty in their respective fields. And 4, dynamic faculty teaching, research, scholarship, and creative activities that are collaborative, interdisciplinary, and community engaged. Everything that we have discussed in this update connects with these 4 core commitments and serves as a strategic path forward. So at this time, we'll stop and entertain any questions.
All right. I think this is an exciting time, Deborah.
No, really not a question because just building on the information that you've given us before. So that's always really helpful, right? When we're building on information. But I was glad to hear you mention this student-centered approach still, even though you want these, you have that research center goal out there, and then the interaction between having top faculty continue to be a priority and their interaction with our students. So it's glad to see that as one of those 4 two of those four things you mentioned.
Yeah, and my hope is that research centers don't say that we're moving away from that student experience. When faculty are doing research is almost exclusively with students. So as we increase research capacity, that means more student involvement in those very experiences.
Exactly. The best research centers are busy with students.
Jeff?
I know you were trying to just tease the research center concept, but can you share a little bit more about some of the thinking there? It's interesting.
Yeah, I'd love to maybe next meeting and give you more details. But the idea is we do have academic institutes and centers on this campus, and they are quite varied. And the Office of Research and Scholarship charters and works with them in facilitating some of their reporting, but also some of their vision for what's next. And so the goal would be to think through, and a lot of times when people say, what are you known for? What's JMU known for? A lot of times these research centers are what we're known for. And so right now we have a breadth of research experience, and that's awesome. But what would be great is to be able to have these research centers, and likely they're going to be interdisciplinary that connect across colleges. So that's where JMU really has their strength, is interdisciplinary connections. And that's where we involve students in these activities. You can get back slides and some of the things that are going on there. This is a hallmark of what we do. So I would expect that those types of things would be something we want to say, this is what JMU is known for, kind of how we do things, but also in these specific areas. And those specific areas would be part of those research centers.
Do you see?
No, I was just gonna add, Anthony's being very careful, but I can be a little bit more bold. We have focus areas already. I mean, climate change, climate science, that is potentially a hub of research that we could see. Early childhood education and development, clearly a great deal of interest and expertise on this campus. That's a potential concept. So there are various concepts and themes that we're starting to gather to see, do they have legs, right? Could this be a center? Could it attract external funding? Is it of interest to students? How does it align to majors? How does it align to doctoral programs? So those are just top of the head ideas, but we're looking to identify where the cluster of interest is and how that serves the Commonwealth.
Yeah, the follow-up question was around, do you envision trying to identify corporate or industry partners to be part of this? I think it'd be an interesting way to elevate it and engage more.
We'd even name a center for a partner like that.
There you go.
It'd be called Hungry. Exactly. Okay, fantastic. Any other comments or questions? All right, thank you very much. Okay, our next topic is the Unleashed campaign update. Unfortunately, Nick Langridge, our Vice President of Advancement, is unable to join us today. So Andy Green and Sheila Smith have graciously agreed to come and provide us the update today. So welcome and thank you for coming.
Thank you, Madam Rector. I think Sheila and I got the call about 7:15 this morning that we were presenting. So this is we're delivering a presentation that Vice President Langridge would have, and I've said to him on the phone, I was really disappointed that he wasn't going to be able to give it, not because I didn't want to, but because he really deserves a lot of credit for the leadership of this campaign. So I just wanted to say that up front. So our thoughts are with Nick, even though he's not here. Also, I'd like to mention, I have a lot of respect for my colleague Chris Orm, but I'd like everybody to know it's just how purple Sheila and I. So one of the things I'd like for everybody to ponder just for a second, but as you know, the campaign that we've been running for the last 8 years has been called Unleashed. And I would say that this name is really actually prophetic. Everything that you've heard this morning, all of the rankings, the elevation of programs, athletics, we really have unleashed the university in a significant way. And I think all of us ought to take a lot of pride in that. And while Sheila and I are going to report to you about how we ran this campaign and the results of it, and we did a pretty good job, really the credit goes to donors. They're the ones who deserve the credit for the success of Unleashed. Many of you are in this room, and so we really want to make sure that folks understand that the credit for the success of Unleashed really is with our benefactors. So thank you, everybody. So we're going to report to you on the performance of the campaign, but one of the things I'd really like to stress is just how deliberate the planning of the campaign was and how linked it was with the strategic plan that you've been hearing a lot about this morning. Go to the next slide, Donna. When President Alger arrived 10 years ago, it's hard to believe. We were younger people then. Conducted a listening tour. Many of you probably attended some of these events. They were all over the country and international. And I was with John in Italy for one of the listening tour stops. And he gathered information from all of our constituents about why Madison mattered to them, what made us different, what did they want to see strengthened. And it was a fabulous way to begin his presidency. And it really teased out a lot of the things that all of us in this room know really matter about JMU. We were just talking about the closeness of faculty and students. I think that was probably one of the most consistent things that President Alger heard on the listening tour, that we needed to maintain and strengthen that as we grow into a research institution. So next slide, Don. That listening tour then informed the Madison Future Commission, which was the group tasked with pulling together the strategic plan that then became the Madison Plan. And while we're doing this, we're also planning the campaign. And Sheila will tell you, Sheila is Associate Vice President of Advancement Planning and Operations. So she's really the brains behind how all this has unfolded. Our consultant, Markson Lundy, said, and this is standard understanding in running campaigns, is that the most effective campaigns are rooted in strategic plans. Because the donor can see that the vision, the big ideas that we're shopping around to folks for funding really are rooted in who we are and who we're becoming. And so one of the reasons I think that we've been so successful with this campaign is because it was tied to the Madison Plan. And it's been incredibly effective. Next slide, Don. So as the Madison Plan began to roll out, we started what was called the advanced gift phase. In some campaigns, they call it the quiet phase. But President Alger was adamant that it would be a very loud, quiet phase. So we're calling it the advanced gift phase. And that began in 2014. Couple highlights there you can see. And so that's when our gift officers are out having conversations with folks who we know are interested in participating in the campaign. And it's before we actually proclaim loudly that we're in a campaign, which we did, in 2018. It was October 26th, the day she 28th. It was raining. We were supposed to do this on the quad. Remember, a lot of you were there. We had all this great planned stuff for out on the quad, and it was like a miserable day. And I think the statistics were it's like the fourth least rainy day of the year we picked, and it was terrible. So anyway, we did it inside, but it was a wonderful success. This is where President Alger and some other folks are describing the 5 major initiatives that the campaign was aimed at funding. If you go to the next slide, Donna. Then we all moved over to Hotel Madison, and there's Nick, so he's part of this. On the screen there. We moved over and had this wonderful dinner and heard from students who were benefiting from scholarships. It was incredibly inspiring, and it really kicked the campaign off in a way that I think shows that we wound up in a wonderful place because we began with such a bang. And so I'd like to turn it over to Sheila now. Once the campaign was kicked off, we then started to begin to see results. So Sheila.
Good morning, everyone. So after the launch, we needed to take the message out on the road. That's the whole purpose of your public campaign. Your public phase of your campaign is to shout from the mountaintops that here we are, we're unleashed. This is what we're doing. So we set about visiting cities across the country to share the message about Unleashed. Next slide, Dawn.
For those who know my story, I was blessed to be a part of the Centennial Scholars Program, and where I was able to receive a full scholarship and receive the mentorship that I needed to fully immerse myself as a college student. And now that I'm making my own path and my own strides in life, and I always give back to this university. Now, it's a raindrop compared to what many of you give, but if for any of you who have ever experienced having a leaky roof in your home, when you put that pot down on the floor and the raindrops just come, eventually that pot fills up.
I was in math class when I got the news that I had earned the scholarship. I had an emotional, overwhelming feeling of acceptance in that moment and received true validation of all of my hard work. It has changed the course of my life and showed my little sisters that there is hope in this world. I want you to know that people who give scholarships change lives. I must be honest with you. I have worked hard to get here, and I must continue to work hard. I don't take this opportunity for granted. There are a lot of other students out there who would work as hard as me if only given the opportunity. It means a lot to me to know that there are people in this world like you who have used their blessings to help others. I'm excited about this Unleashed campaign and about the idea that it will encourage more alumni and more donors to give to JMU so that more students like me can receive a JMU education that will change their lives too. Thank you.
I didn't know we had video, so that's great.
That was from the opening.
That was the launch event. Chiquita obviously beautifully illustrated a fact that we will see a little bit later in some of our numbers. And that was Katrina Shelton, a Centennial Scholar who almost became, I think, the poster child for our campaign. She was so eloquent and so passionate and so smart. I think it was last year, if you follow her on Instagram, you'll know that she just bought a house. And was able to have her siblings move in with her. So it's a huge success story and one we're very, very proud of. So with all of that positive energy, we hit the road for Unleashed. And we managed to make 9 different cities before March of 2020, which we all know what happened at that point in time. So we made a pivot and turned our messaging primarily into virtual messaging, as well as capitalizing off the energy of Giving Day and Women for Madison as well. Next slide, Gomez. So how did we do? Well, I am so proud to announce that we did surpass our goal by quite a huge margin, $251 million towards the $200 million goal. I think that just goes around the clock. And I have to reiterate what Andy said about this is not just a reflection on advancement by any stretch of the imagination. It is due to our donors, due to those people who have invested in our campus. But even more than that, the infrastructure of fundraising does not just start with that development officer talking with that prospect or that donor. That starts when those students are here and with the student programs that they experience in student affairs, with those faculty relationships that they invest in through academic affairs. It's building engagement opportunities for our students and meeting with our alumni, all of those volunteers that serve on boards for us across the university. It's also about infrastructure. I mean, we don't have a strong database and a partnership with IT to be able to manage where our donors are located. We can't ask them to do anything for us. So it is all of our success, and we are incredibly grateful to all of you for participating and being involved in Unleashed. Thank you very much. So next, what did this money go to? The most important part, the numbers are nice, but it's all about the impact. What difference did the campaign make? So over $100 million were for student scholarships. That was a huge priority for Mr. Alger and for all of senior leadership as we moved into this campaign. We have to be able to recruit and retain the most qualified and diverse students we can possibly attract. Next. $83 million for faculty support. So this goes towards professorships and chairs that actually support our faculty and research endeavors. It gives deans flexibility to recruit and hire the best personnel possible. It also is dollars that go to support our academic programs as well. Sorry. Buildings for success. Obviously, these are the most simple things or the easier things to see as far as an impact for campus because they actually came out of the ground. So we have our Atlantic Union Bank Center as well as the College of Business building expansion apartment hall and then renovation of Sugar Hall. 2 phenomenal facilities that are benefiting our students now. Renewing our civil society. This was a collective of some of our signature programs across campus that really are focused on, that are really focused on helping our students, helping us live up to our mission statement of creating students who live meaningful, productive lives. This is about the James Madison Center for Civic Engagement, the Honors College, study abroad, community service learning, all of ethical reasoning and action, all of this rolled into one, and really being a marquee example of what this university is capable of. Realizing our vision and opportunity, these are gifts that have no restrictions. These are Warren's favorite type of gifts. They're all of our favorite types of gifts, because this is a donor saying, I trust you. You do what you think is best with this money. And it allows us to have the flexibility to pursue new opportunities and pursue new trades across the campus. So this is a breakdown over the years, and the gray years are prior to the campaign. When you enter into a campaign, your goal is to double your annual fundraising. So our ruling average prior to 2015, fiscal year 2015, was roughly $8 million. We're ending this campaign being at a solid $20 million on average, if you even things out. Huge success for us. And we want to continue to double. We want to sustain where we're at and continue to grow in our fundraising endeavors. So who gave? We always get asked that question. This is a breakdown, a synopsis of who gave to the campaign, alumnus versus non-alum. I will share that Nick has a more detailed slide later on that shows who's a non-alum. That's a compilation of 11 different categories. So I wouldn't get too panicked yet about our alumni number. Next slide. So major gifts and non-major gifts. This really speaks to Chiquita's point about those raindrops adding up. Major gifts are gifts at the $25,000 level or above. All other gifts, so your $100 donors, your $500 donors, your $5 donors, they made up $54.5 million. Collectively, they made the largest gift to this university. So that's why a message of every gift counts and every gift matters is so incredibly important to us. This shows you the breakdown of where people directed their giving. I think a lot of times, and we're not unique to this, there's often a misconception that all gifts go to athletics. Yes, athletics has a very strong focus on fundraising, they have to, but our donors are giving across the board to academic programs and other passions across campus. So non-endowed gifts and endowed gifts. Obviously, we had a goal to grow our endowment, which we have done. We continue to have a high priority on endowment, but we also had to make a very important strategic decision to have a strong focus on expendable scholarships towards the end of the campaign. It became incredibly clear to us that an endowment spins off at about 4% of what is given. And when you have schools down the road that have $11 billion endowments, we weren't able to keep up in terms of the amount of scholarships and dollars that we could offer. And we didn't want to have to wait for that endowment to grow for us to try and be successful. So we did pivot to a stronger expendable scholarship ask, and that was clear through Kathy and Eric Warden's gift that they made and the Warden match that occurred with that. We are not abandoning endowment. It is incredibly important for the future of this university, but we do have to balance with our current needs as well. Here's the slide I promised you. So our alumni gave it the highest percentage, 37.4%, followed very, very closely by our parents. These are parents of current students, as well as we do have parents that their students graduate and they continue to show up at this university and support our efforts long after their students have graduated, even if they have affinities to other universities. I also want to point out that the foundations that also encompasses much of the work that was done by Anthony Tompkins Group and sponsored research. Those private grants that they received are counted in our fundraising totals. And that was a huge increase for us, especially in that last year of the campaign, that jump up that you saw. So we appreciate that partnership very much. And that's all that we have, but we'd love to answer questions.
Make questions. Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you both for the update, but I also just want to commend Nick Langridge and the advancement team on what an amazing job they did. I think it's noteworthy that in the final year of the campaign, when the original goal had already been met, it ended up having its largest year. So that really says something. They didn't rest on their laurels.
facility. Having worked closely with you guys over the last 8 years, the success of this is not a surprise to me. But thinking back over the history to the very first board meeting where you presented the concept of the Unleashed campaign and you got some very candid feedback on what you thought about it, and you pivoted and accepted the feedback and adjusted to the opening of the very public phase, needing to pivot from the outside plans to the inside, and then having to endure and pivot how you went about reaching out and connecting with all the donors based on the pandemic. The resilience, the grit, the persistence, the enthusiasm, the passion that entire organization shows with the leadership of Nick, the unwavering and unfailing passion that you have for this university, I think is a culmination of the success of this campaign. So thank you. Very good.
Jeff, I want to make a quick comment on the last slide. I thought it was great to see almost 1,000 employees and 1,500 students giving as well.
Yes.
You know, it's starting to build that understanding of the value of giving. That when I was a student here, I don't remember ever, that topic coming up. But the more we can, help educate, it's, like you said, it's a raindrop probably at this stage, but just starting to kind of foster that understanding of the positive impact that after you graduate, and leadership shown by employees of the university as well.
You're going to need a bigger bucket.
Really important point, Jeff, and that was one of our primary goals of the campaign was to create a culture of philanthropy, which had not existed when you and I were students. And we're going to celebrate this loudly on October 21st. Many of you are invited to the campaign celebration. And then after that celebration, we're going to celebrate the impact of the Unleashed campaign for the rest of the year and into next year so that folks really understand that this had a major impact on the institution. So getting to that culture of philanthropy being more fully grown.
That's an excellent point, Andy. So if you're wondering why have you not heard about this? Well, we haven't really pushed it out there because we do want to wait for homecoming for that celebration and to have a wider audience to work there.
Good work.
Anything else? All right. Thank you guys both on the short notice. All right. Well, that almost concludes our agenda. At this point, I believe we are going to move into closed session. So, Mr. Falcon, would you please take us into closed session?
Madam Rector, I move the board go into closed session to discuss the following matters pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A1 to discuss personnel matters involving promotions, retirements, hiring, resignations, salary adjustments, and status changes of faculty members, university administrators, and appointees. Pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A3 of the Code of Virginia to discuss the acquisition of real property located in Harrisonburg, Virginia, and pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A7 of the Code of Virginia to consult with legal counsel pertaining to actual litigation.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. We are moving into closed session. So I'd like to thank all of those who came to participate today. We will take a 5-minute recess while we prepare for our closed session. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. All right, very good. So we have just successfully concluded closed session. Thank you to everyone for your agreement. There are several motions coming out of closed session that we need to make. Mr. Rothenberger, would you please go first?
Sure. Madam Rector, I move the board approve the following real estate transactions. Number one, from the JMU Real Estate Foundation. A 709 Hickory Hill Drive at a purchase price of $410,000. B 1617 South Main Street at a purchase price of $477,000. C 1625 South Main Street at a purchase price of $397,000. D 1641 South Main Street at a purchase price of $397,500. And E 1681 South Main Street at a purchase price of $371,000. And number two, the East Fairview Alley that's being transferred from the city of Harrisonburg at no charge to JMU.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Jeff. Any comments or questions?
I'll abstain.
Thank you, Carrie. All those in favor? Any opposed? All right, so moved. Vice Rector Falcon, would you please make the next motion?
Will do. Madam Rector, I move the board approve the personnel action report as amended.
Is there?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any comment or conversation? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good, so moved. Well, that concludes our very first meeting.